Hi there, and welcome to Leadershipisation, all things leadership. Let me start by asking you something really directly. Are you tired and fatigued, or have you hit a plateau? Now, that's a tough question because these two things are actually quite similar. They're actually quite similar. However, they require different kind of responses to deal with them. Fatigue is all about doing too much pressure, too much output, and too much of a demand on your time. Whereas a plateau, it feels different. It feels different. Maybe what's happening is that you're still delivering, you're still performing, you're still seen to be doing a great job, but internally you're feeling not stretched. You're feeling as though you're not able to do a higher level of thinking. You're feeling as though you're not growing at the pace that you want to. And it's at this point, it's at exactly this point that many leaders shift to the assumption that they're tired. And so what they do is they either push through or they step back. And the real issue is that they're no longer being challenged in a way that sharpens their leadership. So whereas fatigue needs recovery, this plateau needs to be disrupted into some kind of way. My name's Beth Bergen. I'm a global leadership communication coach, and I'd love it if you would join me as we explore this topic of, is it fatigue or is it a plateau? Strong managers don't just manage their energy. They actually recognize when they've stopped growing. And they help, or they look to understand themselves which one it is. Let's start by identifying, is it fatigue or is it a plateau? And the first point is this: fatigue is often physical, but drift is most often psychological. What do I mean by drift? I want to name it for you. It shows up as a loss of engagement. It shows up not as exhaustion, but as a lack of curiosity. It shows up as lower initiative, lower stretch, lower edge. That's what I mean when I talk about drift. So true fatigue shows up in the body. Your sleep is disrupted. Maybe you're irritable. Maybe you're a bit fuzzy in the brain. Maybe there's a loss of edge. Whereas drift shows up, as I said before, this loss of curiosity, reduced initiative, and you're probably avoiding the stretch a little bit because you're not quite sure what's going to happen. Now, what happens is that when our meaning drops, human beings, we naturally start to conserve energy. And often leaders mislabel this draft. I'll start again. Leaders mislabel the drift as burnout, admitting, hey, I don't, yeah, this is what it looks like to me. And admitting the actual truth is a whole lot more confronting for them. The second point I want to talk to today is this: the ideal time to disrupt yourself is when your role no longer evolves or grows with you. This is the ideal time to disrupt yourself. When challenge is down, when stimulation is down, when engagement is down, that's when you should be disrupting yourself, because growth fuels your energy. Growth fuels that desire to learn, to unlearn, to be better. And you may need to actually redefine who you are as a leader, because you could be performing really well out there. Others think that you're going really great guns, but in here, internally, you feel totally underactivated. Totally underactivated. Now, what happens is that you can get a bit confused with this, especially high performers who think, well, I'm not failing. I'm not failing. I'm just no longer expanding. That's why this is exactly the ideal time for you to actually think about disrupting yourself. Now, the disrupting yourself is a topic for a whole leadershipization on its own. So I'll put that on my list of topics to cover into the future. Look out for it. The third point is this: when you're busy, when you are busy in the work, you actually stop leading the work. This is simple and complicated at the same time. Most leaders don't notice when this shift happens because it feels like productivity to them, because they get busy in the work. And so that feels like productivity. The workload goes up, and most of us as leaders then default to doing things, to the execution of doing things. Our thinking time goes down, our vision goes down, our ability to influence goes down. And under pressure, what we do is we move to certainty. We move to certainty and being able to get things done. That's that execution I was talking about earlier. And that feels great because it feels productive. It feels visible. It feels like you can control it. Whereas that strategic thinking, it feels slower, it feels ambiguous, it feels a whole heap harder for you to actually measure it. Yeah? When you shift down a level, you solve things, you fix things, you respond, you approve things. You step in and you get busy in the work. And that's awesome. You're active, you're helpful, you're needed. However, you're no longer leading as your first role. You are no longer leading as your first role. Because as I said before, thinking time down, long conversations to imagine what might be possible, they're down. And what happens is that you shift from being a proactive leader to being reactive. You position yourself so that you're central to the activity, central to the work, but it means that you're away from the direction. And because you're away from that direction, there's less strategic edge. That execution that we were talking about, getting stuff done, it reinforces that identity. I'm reliable, I'm responsive, I'm hands-on. And without this, for some of us when we're leading, we figure that our value goes down, our relevance goes down. But also at the same time, the trust that others have in us goes down. The control that we have, we feel that goes down as well. Strategic thinking goes down. And then zoom, down goes the team autonomy, down goes innovation, down goes succession planning. All of those things that you are responsible for leading when you are leading rather than being in the work, they all go down. And what comes up is bottlenecks. What comes up and what gets in the way are bottlenecks with people deciding who needs to make the decisions, because You're wanting to take that control because it feels like you are actually doing something. It feels like this is my identity. Now, what also happens here is that our leadership leverage is actually shrinking. It shrinks because suddenly we're responsive, we're available, we're busy, we're doing these outputs, and we're actually getting rewarded for that. We're not doing the strategic thinking, the recalibrating or planning or anything like that. However, we're being rewarded and praised, even though we're misaligned to what our intention as a leader is, because externally out there, we're indispensable. Yay, that's my identity. I love this. Internally, potentially, you're disconnected because you've hit that plateau. Your calendar could be absolutely full of all sorts of things. However, there's no space in there for thinking. And as a result, your influence goes down. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to think about. And very often we default to going back to being reliable, to being responsive, to being hands-on. As a leader, that changes the way that others see you. The fourth point I want to talk to today is this. There's a real emotional cost of staying in a role that you've outgrown. There's a real emotional cost in staying in a role that you've outgrown. What happens is that you build up a subtle resentment. Then you can become quite frustrated. That can be rising. Maybe what you've got is reduced patience. And for some of us, we establish a pattern, and that pattern might look like over control, but it might also look like disengagement or something else. And often in this frustration and this reduced patience, we compensate with other behaviors. So we might move to micromanagement, or we might move to perfectionism, which means that not much gets done. Or we might move to avoiding decisions. And what I want you to do, and what I hope you'll get out of today, is that I want you to start to recognize this consciously, because very often it shows up well before we recognize it consciously. Yeah. So have a think, and we'll have a look at some tools in a moment, but have a think about, am I plateauing, or am I just really worn out? Hey, it's only halfway through April. Maybe I'm actually hitting a plateau, but I haven't been honest enough with myself to recognize that. The final point to talk about before I give you a tool is to work it through this with is this. Leadership drift can be disrupted. It can be disrupted. When you've lost your edge, you can reset. It's not about failure. It's not about failure. It's feedback. And if what has happened is that you've hit a plateau, you'll feel the growth tension going down. You'll feel the expansion that is important to you going down. You'll feel as though your why needs a bit of an update. Now, you don't have to panic here, because you can intentionally reactivate this. And there are 6 steps, that 6, 5, and 1 is 6 steps that you can use to do this. It's a 6-step process. So the first one is this. You need to diagnose what's actually going on before you decide. So this is about, is this role too small now? Has my learning plateaued? And this is about the recognition that you need stimulation, you need progression, because without that, your motivation is likely to go down. Step 2, recontract. Have a conversation internally about redesigning your role before you exit. So, maybe you can expand the scope. Maybe you can make it more complex. Maybe you can be responsible for mentoring other people. Can you lead more strategically than you have been doing? And what often happens is if you take this approach of redesigning the role, you can have a lot greater influence when you actually get to shape what your role looks like. So that step is well worth considering. The third step is, what can you do to increase your stretch? What can you intentionally take on? Is there ambiguity? Can you have greater visibility? Is there some change that you can lead? Can you build a new capability or skill for yourself? And this is where it's worth reminding you that growth occurs outside of the comfort zone. So if you've plateaued, in order for you to disrupt yourself, you're going to need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you'll be challenged along the way. And that's what will potentially bring back your passion and help you to redetermine what your why is. Step 4, reconnect to that meaning. Who do I want to become now? What excites me? The more meaning you have, the greater your energy is likely to be. And once you've got that meaning, your energy will come back really quickly. It will come back really quickly because you've got the meaning. Step 5, create some thinking space for yourself. What we do when we get busy doing the doing is that we forget reflection time, strategic thinking, higher level conversations, because those 3 things will help you with your clarity. You can't resolve whether it's a plateau or whether it's fatigue if what you're doing is sitting in a reactive schedule all the time. If everyone's knocking on your door, asking you to come and do this for them because you're responsive, you're there to answer all their questions, aren't I awesome? This is my identity. You cannot resolve whether it's fatigue or a plateau when you're operating in that kind of container. Step 6, have brave conversations. Have brave conversations. Say to people, I need more challenge. What can you give me? Say to people, I want broader impact. Now, if you don't have those brave conversations, what happens is that you stay comfortably contained. Externally, everything seems to be fine. Internally, as we've already identified, there's a misalignment. So let's look at one practical tool that will help you to identify, am I fatigued or have I lost my edge? So this is called the leadership state diagnosis. And over 10 minutes, I want you to write a couple of lists. The first one is signs. Write them all down for yourself. These are the signs that I'm truly fatigued. Now, this might be stuff like I'm not sleeping real well, my emotions are all over the place, physically I'm tired, my focus has just dropped, it's not good. Those look for those signs. You know your body. You know your own mind. Look for those signs. What's actually going on? For some people, they eat more, they consume more, food, alcohol, and other things. For others, they do less of something. So have a look and actually be thinking, what are the signs I might truly be fatigued here? Because that's a different response from if you've lost your edge or you're plateaued. In the other column, signs I may have plateaued. Is this a lack of stretch? Is it a lack of excitement about going to work? Is it that you're avoiding the big decisions? Is it that you're busy doing the stuff that's easy? And once you've spent that time on those two lists, ask yourself honestly, which list feels more true right now? Which list feels more true right now? Now, what's important here is that you get clarity before you determine what your next actions are, such as those 6 steps that I just described: the diagnosing, what it is, the redesigning of your job, the taking on some extra stretch, the reconnecting with meaning, the creating the thinking space, and the brave conversations. Let's have a look now at this deep reflection question. Now, this might also help, as well as those 6 steps and the tool I've given you, this may well help for you to determine exactly where I am right now. The deep reflection question is this: if your leadership energy hasn't returned, despite lots of rest, what might that be trying to tell you about your growth, your alignment, and your direction? If it hasn't returned, despite what might have, despite a lot of rest, what might it be trying to tell you? Now, as we know, with reflection questions, ponder on it, do some writing, go away, come back, look at it again, ask, and what else? And what else? Yeah? This is a tough place for people to be in, but you can get yourself out of it. So let's look at our key takeaways. The realization that not all tiredness is burnout. It might just be that you're misaligned. The second thing is you've got to actually keep evolving your identity. And to evolve your identity as a leader, you need challenges that are going to grow your energy or prop up your energy again and build your influence. The final key takeaway, really, I think, is this: understanding the plateau early helps you to protect your performance, your reputation, and your satisfaction. So don't be afraid to actually look at what it might be, because leadership fatigue, if you're absolutely fatigued as a leader, that deserves recovery. Losing your edge as a leader deserves you being honest with yourself. And confusing the two will keep you stuck for longer than is necessary. So maybe today's conversation made you realize, oh, hey, I am experiencing something different from simple exhaustion. Maybe this is a signal that something in your leadership needs to shift. And if that's the case, congratulations, because that's a huge strategic awareness for you to have. And it can and it will impact on your career. So if you want to explore what that shift might look like, if you want to explore whether role design, whether influence expansion, whether a new leadership identity is what you want, there's a link which we'll stick in the platform that you're watching on, but there's also a QR code and you can book a conversation with me. Don't wait until your disengagement becomes real decline. Don't wait. Act now, because while rest restores energy, growth is exactly what will restore your leadership passion. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them on the platform that you're watching this on. If you're watching it as a replay, #replay would be awesome. I look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, live or on replay anytime you choose to watch it. Thank you. Bye now.